all you cool Ewoks and Jawas. Oh, wait, that's not right. Hello, I'm Mbweha, you can call me Ben, of Team Relentless, and this is the Playbook, where you can come to learn to do something very specific in Star Wars Legion a little bit better than you did before. I hope. Today we're talking about mass activation lists.
Look at the size of that thing.
What's a mass activation list? Asked absolutely no one, but I'm going to pretend like they did. We're going to call a mass activation list anything that has 13 or more activations.
What?
Now before anybody gets their unders in a twist about me not including lists with 12, I'm going to let you finish, but there's a lot of lists that make it to 12. 12-act lists are great, but 13 is really cranking it up to 11, if you're picking up what I'm putting down.
These go to 11.
So let's learn about mass activation lists right now. Alright, so I first ran 13 activations as Rebels back in June 2019 at an RPQ. Back then I did it to claim back my fair share of the clock at tournaments against slower players, but that's a story for another time. So let's fast forward to December 2019. It was then that my teammate Screwtape contacted me about, and I'm serious, a 15 activation Bossk list that he'd started testing for Worlds. Now I've been practicing an operative Luke double tom list that I really wasn't having that much success with, so by the end of January I was on board with some version of mass activation Bossk. I settled on the final version of my super secret 13 activation Bossk list in February and started practicing it. And then?
Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
So we'll never officially see how these mass activation lists performed at the end of the Year 2 meta, right before everything changes with the release of Clone Wars Strike Teams and Vital Assets. But, unofficially, Fake Worlds aka Knowledge and Defense did happen, and I tied for third, so it's safe to say the list archetype is strong. Side note about Knowledge and Defense, if you're wondering how Screwtape did with his list, unfortunately he was unable to participate. However, 4 of the top 5 spots were held by Team Relentless members, with the number 1 spot going to our very own John Griffin. Wow, Ben, thanks for the history lesson. Can you please get to number 1, Activation Advantage. The whole purpose of running so many activations is to capitalize on what's called Activation Advantage. Activation Advantage means having more activations than your opponent, and it matters because it means that at the end of the turn you might get to go several times in a row without your opponent being able to respond to what you're doing. Imagine playing your 13 activation list against an opponent's 8 activation list. You can end up going 5 times in a row at the end of turn 1. 5 times. That's more than half their total activations. Also, there's a lot of lists out there that rely on going last first with their most powerful units for maximum effect. Those lists just straight up can't do that because you out-activate them. Number 2, last first. So speaking of going last first, you should get to do this a lot with your mass activation list, and so you need a plan for how to take advantage of it. Now remember that going last in one turn and then first in the next is pointless if you're not using that opportunity to take an important shot or hide something out of line of sight. Typically, the ideal last first play is to move out with a powerful unit from a completely hidden position and take a shot. Then at the beginning of the next turn, shoot again and move back completely out of line of sight. Number 3, the Imperial 3333. So let's start to talk about list composition. Spoiler alert, my 4th point is all about specific list examples, but before we get there, we need to talk about the skeleton 3333 that Imperial players have access to. The core of Imperial mass activation is 3 shore troopers, 3 mortars, 3 sniper strike teams, and 3 E-webs. That brings you up to 12 activations with a cool 127 points to spare. It's what now? It's 227 points to spare? Yeah, so 12 activations with 227 points to spare. So you start with this 3333 nonsense and then spice to your liking. Number 4, list examples. Let's talk about specific list examples. Now, all of these are linked in the description below, but we're going to be looking at them on screen as well. Another side note, I'm going to be spitting out numbers that I call defensive ratings and ranged firepower ratings. These are rating systems that I've been working on to help me compare units and lists numerically while accounting for keywords. It's still a work in progress, and we don't have time right now to go over the method to my madness for generating these numbers. For the purposes of this video, just compare the numbers I give to each other so you can get a general sense of the strengths and weaknesses of those lists. This is the list Screwtape settled on after months of testing. It started out with 2 officers and 15 activations, but he dropped one of the officers for the upgrades that you can see. This list was specifically designed to be able to defeat Sabine R2 Tauntauns, a list archetype that we felt was the strongest going into Worlds. That's a list archetype that can come in at as many as 12 activations, so keeping it at 14 helps conserve activation advantage as long as it's played conservatively. Also, you notice that 20-point bid? Seems a little crazy at first until you realize this list absolutely cannot play Recover the Supplies against Tauntauns. You do what you gotta do to keep blue, as they say. What do you mean no one says that? Hey! It's my list! So the T-21 is the best heavy weapon in the game, and I just couldn't stomach not taking it on my shores. So, I dropped an E-Web from the 3333. If you compare the ratings I used, you can see that I basically sacrificed a little defense for some more offense. The bid is 15, which easily got me blue in every game I played in Knowledge and Defense, which was crucial when I played against Tons. It lost twice, the first time to Zero Moon's more traditional shoreline on day 1, and to my teammate Griffin's own unique take on a shoreline that ended up winning the whole tournament. Next! Yeah, so speaking of units that like to go last first a lot, you can have a 13-act Vader list. Now this list has considerably less range firepower, but that's fine because Vader. The Dark Lord of the Sith is the real star of the show here. Just take your time getting him into position, trade jabs with the rest of your army, and let him do his thing in the mid and late game. What about the Rebels? So this list actually has the best defensive and range firepower ratings of all the lists I'm showing you. So why didn't I run in over a 13-act boss? 3 reasons. It's nearly all range 3. It's more vulnerable to attrition, and it has a lighter bid. In the current meta of Tauntauns and Shorelines, all of those things are bad. Now, you can swap out 2 of the Z6s for DLTs, and that helps with the range 3 problem a bit, but then your bid is only 1. Number 5, 13-act boss tips. So I waffled about doing a video just about how to play this list, but ultimately I decided I'd rather do a more macro view of all mass activation lists. Still, I wanted to be able to give some specific advice about playing a mass activation list that features Bossk. So here's what you do. Your turn 0 is to deploy Bossk somewhere where he is completely safe from enemy fire. Pretty much everything else goes in a death ball somewhere. Ooh, and remember that your E-Webs, having the least range in your army, need to be at the forefront of your death ball. Bossk should always have a face-up order on him. This is so he can go last first as often as possible, and so that he is completely hidden from line of sight for the majority of your opponent's activations in the early game. For command cards, standing orders is your friend. It's not unusual to play it on both turns 1 and 2. This really helps you maximize your activation advantage. On the turns that you play Assault and Push, the orders that don't go on Bossk should be used in one of 3 ways. To get orders to a vulnerable sniper so that they can shoot and hide, to get orders to shores so they can coordinate to E-Webs so that E-Webs can fire before they get shot at, or to get orders to shores who will coordinate to mortars so that they can fire support sniper shots into armor. The most powerful combo you have in your toolbox is going last first with lying in wait into Reptilian Rampage. You basically get to attack with Bossk 3 times with a total of like 10 or more aims, and then you just move him right back out of line of sight again. And as always, first and foremost, play to the objective. Bonus! Remember that this list only keeps its activation advantage if you don't act a fool with your vulnerable units. Go out of your way to keep your units safe. Speaking of activation advantage, remember that using fire support on your mortars will reduce the number of activations that you have for that round. Plan ahead for that. Remember to save your 1-pip command cards for when you really need to go first. Summary! Let's review. Number 1, having more activations than your opponent is good. Number 2, plan out which of your units is going to go last first. Number 3, when building an Empire mass activation list, start with the 3333 skeleton. Number 4, check out the list in the description for some strong examples of mass activation. And number 5, if you're playing mass activation Bossk, use your tools to keep him alive and shooting. Now you know how to build and play mass activation lists better than you did before. I hope. If you liked the video, please prove it and subscribe.